It is my pleasure to introduce our first candidate, which is Janelle Moore. There are comment cards and a brief biography about Janelle at the back of the room, and we'll ask you to listen to the presentation, and then if you would be willing to give us feedback, please pick up one of those tonight before you leave. We look forward to hearing your thoughts. As we prepared for the program for tonight, we asked each candidate to prepare a presentation covering 4 areas. We wanted them to give a personal introduction, talk about crime prevention philosophy or effective strategies, effective efforts to address recruitment and retention of police officers, and we also asked them to comment on the current state of policing in America and how that will influence their role as the next chief of police in Lincoln. So with that, and without further ado, please welcome Janelle Moore to the podium.
Good evening. I started off my preparation tonight back in that room, which was when I was assigned here as a sergeant on this team area, on the substation room there. I read Ecclesiastes 3:1 through 8, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm here because I feel for everything there's a season, and this is my season. So, good evening. Thank you for coming and taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with me tonight. First, I'd like to thank Jennifer Brinkman and the mayor's office for helping the city go through this process. I'd also like to thank Miss Rebecca Newberger and Miss Charlotte Clansinger from the Police Executive Research Forum. They really did a nice job at shepherding me through this process and keeping me informed of what the next evolution would be. And lastly, I'd like to thank the Mayor's Search Committee for their participation. It's not easy to sit and listen and score a number of interviews. So I thank them very much for being part of the process. I came to Lincoln in 1976. Prior to that, my family landed in Bellevue in 1967. My father was in the Air Force. I grew up with Chief Master Sergeant. He worked his way through. We all know that the sergeants are the ones who run the military. So he ran our house with discipline and accountability. So I probably should have that tattooed somewhere in memory of my father. But he always told me to apply myself. And if I applied myself, success would occur. And I think that's true. My mother possessed a strong faith in God. She was Pentecostal. And I think that's the gift that she gave to my brother and I. I began my journey of cultural competency and proficiency, I think, through the years that we traveled overseas and even in the United States. I was born in Hawaii. My brother was born in Alaska. We spent time in Japan, Turkey, Texas. We lived in Texas during the Civil Rights Movement, which was a very interesting and tumultuous time. And I personally think that we're there again. And we need to pay attention and take heed, particularly with police services and justice. My history in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1976, I came here to go to the university. My first iteration of my life, I planned to be a middle school physical education teacher. Middle school. Troubled times. You know how the narrative goes. Life changed. Focus has changed. Stories changed. And I decided I wanted to be a police officer instead. Worked out at the penitentiary for a period of time. Thought I wanted to be a state patrol officer. You know, they've got those really nice outfits and those hats. But they had a requirement in 1982 that you have to be 5'7". I couldn't be 5'7" if I stood on my tippy toes. So the Lincoln Police Department in 1982 was hiring. At that point in time, affirmative action was in action, and they were looking for women, minority people, to fill the ranks at the police department. So in 1982, I applied and I was hired. That was an interesting life. I was surrounded by a lot of men, and I learned a lot of things, however, from my mentors. I wanted to become a police officer, to be a role model, to help the community see someone who looked like them. So that fulfilled my first goal. The second goal was to help vulnerable people, marginalized people, women and children, and the elderly. I may have been the first woman of color, the Lincoln Police Department, but I have to raise up the African American women who were there before me. And they weren't police officers, but they were there before me. I think about PSO Donna Jones, who has passed. I think about a handful of others who were public service officers. They worked in records. They worked in the jail, caring for the prisoners. So at this time, I'd like to lift them up. Because of them, I'm here. So during my 34 years at the Lincoln Police Department, I did complete my degrees. I have an undergraduate degree in organizational management, and I have a master's of science degree in justice administration and crime management. I worked my way through the ranks, starting at the bottom, working the streets, working at night. It was kind of interesting when the sun would rise. You know, it was quiet at night, and there was the different things happening at night. You know, I'd call them the night people. Then when the sun would rise at 7 o'clock, it would be like, freshness. So I decided that I wanted to pursue leadership roles. So I started as a field training officer, training new officers to be police officers, which kind of played into that whole teaching theme that I had when I first walked in. I was a field training officer coordinator, which over the next realm, overseeing the field training officers. I was able to be assigned to ride a motorcycle. I like motorcycles. So that was really fun. We rode Kawasaki's, not Harleys, but Kawasaki's. They were really fast. So Highway 2, Reddit traffic, that was awesome. I was a non-lethal force instructor. Then I got promoted to sergeant. Worked all over the city. I would say that was the best position I ever had because I could work with the citizens, can handle citizen complaints, I could educate the citizens, I could educate the officers, I could go to any call I wanted to. It was wonderful. Then the personnel sergeant job opened up, and that's the hiring sergeant, that's HR. And in my mind, that was standing at the door, shaping the Lincoln Police Department in hiring the cops that would give the service to you. So I spent about 6 years or so there. Then a captain's position opened up, took the test, and I was promoted. I was promoted to the duty command, nights again. That's the thing about, working on a police department. It's kind of like being in the military. You got to go back to nights and learn your job. That was a great job too, because that's where I learned decision making and how it was great. It was third shift. It was great that the decisions were mine. I didn't have the chiefs around during the day making my decisions or having to go to them. It was my decisions, except when we needed SWAT, I had to call the chief. So running the city, learned a lot at that point in time about leadership. The the Northwest team captain position opened up. We're geographically located. There's 5 teams in this city. Northwest is up by the university. North Bottoms, Air Park, out to Fallbrook. That was like running a little, small police department. The chief gave us some autonomy, and I think they still do, to run their teams the way they need to run them. Giving service to the community groups, running special projects because of maybe some crime prevention issues or suppression. I was on the Northwest team for about 6-7 years, and the personnel captain job opened up. And I thought, now I have some more ability, some more talent to go and work in the personnel unit again, the HR unit again, which I did. We got a new range during the time that I was there. State of the art, actually, very nice. A lot of training. And this is about the time when Obama's 21st Century Policing Report came out, where they really started looking at the culture of policing and asking departments to consider changing attitudes, changing processes, being more empathetic, taking into consideration the sanctity of life, and not killing people, and working with people, and taking more time to talk to people. So I went to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. That was part of my training. I've been on a number of community boards. I feel like I know Lincoln, from mental health to people with intellectual disabilities. Currently, I serve on Hold Cops Accountable, the Malone Center. It was important to me to be able to, after we had the civil unrest in front of the city-county building, I felt it was important to hear what the community was saying and what they were needing. So I became part of that. I sit on the Woods Committee. This is the Lincoln Regional Center. It's a committee that recognizes and awards good work. Technicians who deal with those who are residents at the Lincoln Regional Center. I also sit on the stakeholders board with Lincoln Fire and Rescue. I think it's important for the citizens to know what our emergency services are doing, where the money is going. So I serve on that committee also. I also serve on the ACT committee, the quarter-cent sales tax and street improvements. I think we've actually done a pretty good job. A lot of streets have been repaired all over the city. So it's not just one area of the city, and we collaborated and decided where those areas would be. This is not out of the ordinary for me to be standing here. I've retired. Spent 34 years on the department. I retired, and now I'm here again. And in 2015, I was vying to be police chief of Lincoln Police Chief, and I was not selected. But maybe that wasn't meant to be. And now I'm back again. So I think, in working with Lincoln Public Schools, been there for 4 years, learned a lot of grace, giving grace to people. And their moniker is All Means All. And I think as we're all joined here in this community with this community collaboration, it's just not in the Lincoln Police Department, it's all over the city. It's in the school system. The school system deals with the same people that the Lincoln Police Department deals with, families and children. So All Means All, I think, really does speak to cultural proficiency. It speaks to equity, and it speaks to inclusion. So I talked a little bit about the change that's happening here in policing. The current state of policing, it's been steadily progressing. Hearing calls from marginalized citizens, calls and cries, I would say, for criminal justice and police reforms. You know, nationally, police brutality and the use of force policies have been at the forefront, I think, of policing and discussion for years. But there have been incremental police change in policies and practices within some agencies, but not all. But we still have those officers who are falling outside of those policies and practices, and we need to challenge the accountability within those police agencies. In May 2020 in Minneapolis, Mr. George Floyd, a man who was experiencing struggles in his life, like many of us have, lost his life unnecessarily at the knee and hands of police officers as citizens, and later the world watched. 9 minutes and 29 seconds was the tipping point, setting off a powder keg all over this nation, and actually all over the world. But it became a defining moment for every police organization. 800 and, I don't know, there's 800,000 police officers in this country. So in many cities in this country, including Lincoln, citizens did exercise their constitutional rights and freedom of speech, and I think that's good. That needs to happen. But in Lincoln, there was, earlier, before the curfew, I saw it. There was a Rainbow Coalition meeting in front of the City County building. I was really excited because Lincoln Public School students were letting their voices be heard, and that was impressive. That tells me that our school system is doing something right. But once the sun fell, after dark, what happened and what got ignited was unconscionable. It was unacceptable, and it upset me greatly. In the role as the chief of police, my guidance in staying on course would be to use the mission, values, and goals statement. And I think it is embodied in every police-citizen interaction. I really do feel that, including our non-commissioned staff. If it weren't, we wouldn't be getting the support. The police department would not be getting the support from the citizens that they do. I would follow this statement: we, the members of the Lincoln Police Department, working with all people, and all means all, are committed to providing quality services that promote a safe and secure community. I think that statement really does speak of officer accountability to the people they serve, and that's you. I'd also depend on the strategic plan. It's a living document. It was developed in partnership with community members, which is very important. That means there's a collaboration, there's a partnership, and the recommendations that are set forth are definitely taken seriously and implemented. I'd also rely on the department's community policing model of listening, of collaborating, relationship building, and adhering to best practices as it relates to procedural justice. And what procedural justice is basically treating people with dignity and respect, no matter who they are. We have quite a homeless population here, and we too are expected to serve them. Listening, I think listening with an open mind and heart, and with neutrality. Allowing people to tell their side of the story and not jumping to conclusions, and being transparent in the decision-making process. The overarching goal, I would say, would be to build and maintain trust. Trust is important. Providing opportunities for community, group dialogue, education, and department training, but not limited to unbiased policing. Fair and impartial policing, de-escalation training, and welcoming the citizens into our training, whether that be the Citizen Police Advisory Board, so that they can come in and see, what type of training we do. When I was at the department and involved in training, it was important to me to invite ethnically diverse members of our community in to participate as presenters, as participants, and members of the working groups and committees that the department, ad hoc committees that the department sit side by side. This is one thing I think that helps in this current environment. Well, and last, transparency with the community. Open the doors, inviting the community into our house and continuing that dialogue, about traffic stops and why we have disparities in numbers, and searching for some answers. The mayor was so gracious to come up with money for body-worn cameras for everyone on the department, all the officers who are street officers, which is outstanding. So I think as a department, we also must look introspectively at ourselves, because we are dealing with a diverse community. We need to look introspectively to make sure that we're identifying and confronting our implicit and explicit biases and isms. We all have them. In Lincoln, our crime numbers are relatively low. And I think we take crime prevention very seriously. And crime prevention, I think, is a variable of crime reduction. There's a lot of positive outcomes, particularly in the problem-oriented policing SARA model that's used in this city, that's been used in this city daily to address issues and problems. A SARA model means scanning, you identify the problem, analysis, gathering all the data, maybe talking to the neighbors, having meetings, responding, and then coming back and reassessing it. Was your hypothesis of the problem correct? Crime prevention is important. Crime prevention is wrapped into just about everything. Maybe strategies and saturation patrol. You've been listening to the news. You know that we are starting to see an uptick in violent, gun-related calls for service. And you know that where these locations are, northeast and over in the core. So these are times when we need to put officers in those neighborhoods, proximity, on foot. And I'm anticipating that you'll see some of that this summer, but crime prevention, that's crime prevention. Trying to get there before the lid blows off. Many people think they feel safe in Lincoln, but we still go out and do security surveys for them. They ask the cops to come out, check my house out and see where I should put locks, lights, maybe crime prevention through environmental design. And we've used that too. I think that's important. Environmental design means it might be a dark street. A lot of Larcy Sermano might go in and look and say, this tree needs to be cut because that street light is being blocked and it's not filling this area with light. Crime prevention is very, very important. So we need to have the staff to do that. When you think about crime prevention, just a little point, crime prevention triangle. You imagine a triangle. On one side there's desire, on the other side there's ability, and on the other side there's opportunity. Any of those missing, crime won't happen. But I think really we are looking at opportunity, to take away the opportunities for those that have the desire to commit the crime. So we need officers to to go out and do the PSAs and the TV radio shows and do the social media and all of that. So our attention in the realm of recruiting and retaining officers and retention. I heard some really good things today at the Lincoln Police Department. We have an arduous recruitment and hiring process, as you well know, as you expect. You expect us to look for qualified people with integrity and honesty. But they were talking about what I heard was it takes about 6 to 8 months, 6 to 8 months to be hired, to be a police officer, just to walk in the door, not even to start your training in the recruit academy. And they were telling me, which I know, is they are going to be shortening the hiring process, which is exactly what I would suggest and support. 6 to 8 months. So they're going to reduce it to 4 months and take some things out. They sent a recruiter to South Carolina, which was an excellent idea, because they do year-round hiring, and it's kind of interesting. Everything goes in cycles. John Ways, sitting down here, he was a police officer a few hours ago. No. Back in those days, officers could go into the police department, and within a couple days, they're hired. They were hired. They had their uniforms, they had their ticket books or whatever they had to write in, and they were, on their way. So I'm very proud that this is what they've looked at in regard to recruiting. We have a no-show rate that I could never explain. People would fill out applications and not show up. And I think some of that was because it took so long. Took too long. So that would be, in recruiting, I really think marketing. I think we need to do a better job at marketing, using social media, using Zoom, building those relationships. I think it's extremely important. Diversity, we're always looking for a diverse population because we have diversity here in this city. And I think the relationships will draw people here. If we talk to them about the community, talk to them about, particularly people who are African American, where they can get their hair done, where they can go to a barbershop, churches. We need to start getting into getting closer to people. This, just sending out an application, sending out an email, it's not going to work anymore. I think there's a higher expectation from people, from women, from men, to have the department members reach out to them and stand with them. Inclusion and equity in recruiting and hiring is important, particularly minority people and women. That's important. The retention of officers is the other side of that coin of recruitment. We're in a generationally, literature says that, generationally, jobs for the millennials are experiences. And if it's not something that is filling their desire, they may move on to something else, to experience something else. So we need to make sure that these new officers are engaged, that we are giving them opportunities to be, I think, recognized. We're asking their opinions, and they see their opinions being used, their ideas. So some of the strategies I would say, one thing that I would do is, as the chief of police, is for those folks who are leaving, the rumor mill says so-and-so's going to be leaving, and we never make contact with them. I would want to sit down with them and talk to them, talk to them and ask them, why are you leaving? Is there something that we can do to assist you? Sometimes it may be someone feels like they've been discriminated against, or somebody said something that was insensitive. We're serious about that everybody feels welcome and everybody feels part of the agency, because they're all skilled and we need them. Maybe supervisors mentoring these officers, because we have an issue where maybe some people aren't too interested in being promoted. We need people to be promoted. In succession planning, you need to have people moving up into captain and essentially chief's position or assistant chief's position. So we need to start focusing on succession planning and mentoring people and talking to people. It's a lot of talking. Relationship building is a lot of talking and a lot of time. So that's what I plan on doing. I plan on building relationships with the citizens. I plan on building close relationships with the officers. And I thank you for coming tonight. You want me to move?
All right, so I mentioned that for each of the candidates, we gave them those 4 areas we wanted them to prepare to address at the public forum. And now I have 3 questions that were not provided to candidates in advance, interacting with the media and answering questions you didn't prepare for as part of being the police chief. So we thought this would be an important part of our forum. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question, and then I'll have you come up, Janelle. Question number 1 is, what is your plan for adequately training school resource officers in childhood and adolescent trauma and cognitive development?
Well, I know that we have a very good mental health community practitioners here. Joe Wright, who was a police captain for the Lincoln Police Department, is now working at Lincoln Public Schools, who teaches the beta class, which is mental health on all levels, recognition. He also has people who are experiencing mental health come to this training. So I would partner with the Mental Health Association, community, and of course my leadership team, and we would discuss what appropriate training would be. I'm sure there's something out there. A lot of times you don't have to reinvent the wheel, just need to reach out to your partners, reach out to other agencies even that are doing the same thing, providing this training. This is definitely needed. I heard this today at the police department asking about brain development and those kinds of things. Back in the day, I was not a school resource officer, but it was called a youth aid officer, and it was basically a school resource officer. But my schools were Northeast Lincoln, and we went into the schools, we ate with the kids, we interacted with the kids, we did whatever with the kids, but we also had a role. Kids that got tickets, referrals we called them. They were age 7 to 15. We tried to keep them out of the system. So they would come to the police department, and we were the counselor, the judge, the attorney, the mother, the father, whatever. So they'd sit down with us. And it became clear that a lot of these little kids, they didn't know really what the whole system was about. And because they're little kids, they might be 15, but they're still little kids. So we would sit with them, counsel them, talk about the criminal justice system, or on their level, the ticket, what that means, the violation, if they were an adult, what would happen, try to get them to look a little bit down the road. if they wanted to be on the football team in high school, that may keep them from not being on the football team. Those kinds of analogies. Sometimes it worked. We didn't have to see them again. Other times it didn't work, and we saw them several times, and we had to ask them to do little projects at home. Here's something I want you to write about. I want you to think about it. I want you to talk to your mother about it or talk to your father about it. And then I want you to write something, and then I want you to bring it back to me. And so we'd make another appointment for them to come in, and we deal with it. So I fully understand what you're talking about. We have a lot of juvenile crime here in the city, largely from autos, vandalisms, those kinds of things. So I think that would help. I think that would help quite a bit. And like I said, we're changing. This process of policing is changing, and police officers, we get trained, but we need professionals to handle some things. And I think those mental things, things with children, sometimes we need help, and I would partner with. Wouldn't hesitate to partner.
Thank you. Our second question is, how do you plan on ensuring police safety and morale of both the police and LPD civilian employees?
Morale is always an interesting one. It goes up and it goes down. You can please a lot of people, but sometimes you can't please all people. Right now, because of the happenings that have occurred here with the loss of the officer and the current state of affairs nationally, officers are hesitant. And I think over time, and I mentioned grace, I think over time with interfusing, and we talked about this today, some, I guess we call it resiliency training, to allow the officers to heal from what happened to them. Trauma does funny things to people. It makes you angry. It makes you draw in. And it makes you sometimes not want to put yourself out there because, you're afraid you're going to be the poster child who makes the wrong decision, and you're in the newspaper and you get terminated. So morale, sometimes a person needs to enter with a positive outlook, who hasn't been there for has been gone, has been out in the world, in the community, knowing full well, hearing how the community really appreciates the police department. But when morale gets low, there's a feeling that you're not appreciated, you're not valued. And that's really because you're in the forest, you can't see. So as the police chief, I think it's going to help. It's great to have people come in and bake with baked goods and all that good stuff, and that was great. But that when you go through trauma, it's the hard thing, loss and all that. It's after, when everybody leaves, and you're left to deal with it. So I think this is great. I heard about it today. There's some training, got some money. There's some training that will come in and help officers unload some of that stuff that's on their minds. Morale, value. You got to make sure that the officers know they're valued and supported. I'm a talker. I don't hesitate to tell the officers that I love them. I had a meeting on Thursday with the union president and the vice president, and they were asking me, why do you want to come back at this time, that kind of thing. And I said, well, I feel like I'm being called back. And it's not really going back because I've been gone and that's a new department, so I'm being called to move forward. I love this community. Like I said, I know this community well. I love the department. It's an excellent department. It's an excellent department. I know most of the officers. I know their person. I know what they think. I know how they feel. Most of them are here because they want to help. They want to give service. So I told them that I loved them. And I think that went a long way, but I do. So.
Okay, our third and final question. Do you think racial bias has a role in how communities are policed? And if so, what are you going to do to help eliminate that bias?
Racial bias, racism, sexism, all those isms. First of all, like I said earlier, we need to identify it in ourselves and confront it. We need to have training where we can have dialogue and talk about it. We can become more competent about it, or about our biases, implicit and explicit biases. Training, and talking about it. That kind of, when you're talking about racial biases and, fair and impartial policing, and I'm sure there's other things coming down the pike, we need to inundate ourselves with that, because it's perspective, it's changing perspective. I used to, when I taught the recruits, we did I called it cultural competency class. And one thing that we used to do, and it was like arts and crafts, okay? We would have a bag, and I would tell them to write words on a piece of paper, the themes that they learned, they heard in their families as they were raised. And many of them were kind of racist, to put it mildly. And then I asked them to draw, pictures of what their family experience was. And then I would have them talk about it. So they would take a little journey by pulling those things out of their bags and expressing to everyone else what they had learned as a child, and then we talk about, where are we now? Where are you now with this? How do you feel now? And, we were making some inroads. Of course, I had a few that said, why do we have to talk about this? That's, all that stuff was a long time ago. And, of course, I would have to tell them, no, it wasn't a long time ago. That's still here. And then I would have citizens come in, diverse citizens come in and talk about their experiences with police, and they weren't very good experiences with police, and they were based in biases and racism. So we took a journey. We need to continue to take that journey. Until we get proficient. And I think it's probably a lifetime.
All right, with that concludes the formal portion of tonight's forum. I think it would be a good time to say thank you to Janelle for participating in this public engagement portion of our program. As I mentioned before, there are comment cards at the back of the room. If you have time, you can provide written feedback and leave it here before you go home tonight. You can also provide your thoughts by emailing to the mayor at mayor@lincoln.ne.gov, or you can call our office at 402-441-7511. I encourage you, if you would like to, those that are watching and were not able to be here tonight, to use those methods as well to provide feedback. There's a few refreshments at the back of the room, and Janelle will be here to meet anyone who wants to engage in discussion for the next 45 minutes or so. And we hope that you will come back again tomorrow night or view the public engagement forums that we have for the next 3 candidates the rest of this week. Thanks again for being here. Good night.